Welcome to Required's LinkedIn Live. We are talking today about the UK budget. Some say the biggest budget, certainly since Nigel Lawson. And if you remember him, you're nearly as old as me. With me to sort of talk through the implications for recruiters, we've got our partners at Toast Accounting, Michael Rutherford and Niall Toland. So welcome to the live, guys. Hoping that all technicals are working well, and it's good to have you both on. So, before we go into it and talk about Rachel's news, do you want to just introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just go first. My name's Michael Rutherford. I'm a partner in Toast Accountants. So we are an online accountant specialising in the recruitment industry. So interested to hear the thoughts on how Rachel got on today.
Fair enough.
And Niall Toland, I'm one of the chartered accountants here at Toast.
Fantastic. So we're live, we're on LinkedIn, we're also on YouTube, and we're going to try and set it up. So I'm just trying to set up my machine. So if you see me hacking away at something, I'm trying to work out how to see all your questions. But let's kick it off. So the big news, employers' national insurance, widely trailed, I think, amongst everything from every sort of tax you can imagine. Employers' national insurance seems to be the one that's landed on it and is the one that people are really talking about. So what is the impact? 1.2% sounds small, Michael, but I think you've been doing some modelling and it's not quite as good as that.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I think in a political spin sense, they're using the 1.2 to maybe minimise the impact that's there. I mean, really, if you took 1.2 just as a straight increase, it actually means 9% of an increase in some employers' NI bills. But actually, the reduction in the threshold, so the combination of 1.9 and the reduction in the threshold, we've modelled it on 300 employees on the average UK wage, and it hits 25% of an increase in employers' NI, which is just huge. And there was an audible gasp when the thresholds were announced, and it's for very good reason, as you can see. So that's really the biggie, as you say.
So just say that again. So if you're employing Joe Average, at what sort of salary?
So UK average, so 32k, around that figure, 300 employees. Your employer's NI contribution will be 25% higher in April 25. Now there are positives for the smaller firms. So with lower levels of employees, it actually is a reduction and a saving overall because of the combination of the employment allowance. But yeah, they've definitely hit the big firms. So if you are up and maybe treble four figures of staff, it's a real killer.
Where's the sort of inflection point, do you think, between because that is typically recruitment consultants, basic add-on commissions, etc., but that's probably the rump of what people are employing as recruitment consultants. So what's the crossover point roughly? Is it super small businesses or everyone getting it?
We did take a look at that, and it's about 250,000. If that's what your gross salary is, your gross salary payroll, it's going to be somewhere around there where you start to go from actually the cost of your company has decreased because of the increased level of the employment allowance from 5 to 10,500. It goes, about that point to 250,000. So it is going to be small. And just to pick up on what Michael said, I mean, what was widely trailed was about a 9% increase. So it was already discussed, basically. I know Faisal Islam on BBC had spoken about this. He pointed out specifically, don't be fooled by the 1.2 percentage point increase. It does sound small, but when you run the numbers, it's about 8.79%. But nobody really knew, or it wasn't widely discussed, that there was going to be a reduction then in the secondary threshold as well. So that's the big killer. I mean, you're talking about a 45% drop in the size of the secondary threshold. So not only do you have 1.2% on the rate, so the rate's going up by 1.2%, you've also got a massive amount of earnings now coming into that net as well, being charged at the higher rate.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is a double hit for companies, and I know they're publicising they've frozen the income tax thresholds, and they're for the workers and all the narrative that there was around that, but really they've completely lumped it to employers. So it's it's really. I'll be interested to hear what the reaction is from business, because it's just, whenever you combine that then, which I'm sure we'll come on to, is the national minimum wage increases as well. There's some companies that are just going to find it extremely difficult to sustain the increases that have been piled on them here.
Do you see, obviously people have a workforce right now, and this will hit in April. Do you think people who were thinking of hiring will change their minds now, or at least think twice?
I don't know. I think there's probably enough. They probably see that there's enough in the job market to sustain some of it. I think really companies they're trying to push companies towards productivity gains and maybe that sort of side of things. But I think it might force a few more to make permanent decisions and stick with them rather than maybe relying on the temporary staff or the contractors and things like that, just to kind of give themselves a bit of certainty. I think one of the main points about this was there was so much speculation leading up to this budget. It was doing real damage in terms of people not making decisions, people kind of delaying. And whilst it is very, very bad in a lot of senses, the positive is there's clarity in a lot of other things. And so businesses, and particularly the recruitment industry, they're very good at adapting to what the changed environment is. And so from that perspective, at least now there's a clear path forward. We know what it is. We adjust the businesses going forward. We tweak as we go. So from that perspective, I think there's maybe positives to take as well.
So employers and I, generally I would say from a perspective of it's not going to make it any better in terms of people hiring more people, and also as well, changing roles. But the other big one that I know has been trailed quite hard was capital gains tax. So I think from memory, the basic rate is moving from 10 to 14, then to 18 in subsequent years, and the higher rate moves in line with the higher rate for property from 20 to 24. Are you surprised it wasn't higher?
I think they had started to roll back from that. I think they realised how damaging that was going to be. I don't think anybody was really expecting the upper end. But I suppose, like Michael said, it brings a bit of clarity, a bit of simplification to the capital gain system, where at least there's the knowledge now that the rates are in line with one another. There isn't a separate rate for property. Yes, it's increasing, and you're looking at 18 or 24%, whether it's property or any other assets. But I suppose the one thing that was welcomed, and it wasn't definitely going to happen, was the retention of the business asset disposal relief and the lifetime allowance on it of 1 million. So, that's going to be heartening, I guess, for any business owners, particularly ones that are, were considering their options with the knowledge that the capital gains rates were going to go up. They would have been considering maybe.
Do you want to explain what that allowance is to the sort of, because I think it's quite a specific thing. To the layman, how would you describe it?
So, it used to have a more useful name, which was entrepreneur's relief. So, that did what it said on the tin. So if you were a business owner and you sold the shares in your own business, or you have a significant shareholding in a business with someone else. As long as you've held that shareholding for 2 years or more, you can then avail of the relief when you come on to sell those. If you make a gain on the selling of your business as whole shareholder or selling your share as a part shareholder, you would be taxed. Your gain on that would be taxed at 10%, as opposed to the prevailing capital gains rate.
Yeah. So so if we take it for a business sale of 2 million, it would be the first million would be 10%, the second million would be 24% now. So it's a significant relief available. So I mean, there was talk of 39% on everything, which obviously 10% of a million is much easier to take. Tax is never something anybody wants to pay, and it's always eroding your gain. But paying 39% of a business that you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into, and then ultimately sell is be a lot harder to swallow, I suppose.
And to be fair, the Chancellor did make that distinction, when in her preamble before she came on to the increases in capital gains. She did say that they wanted to continue encouraging entrepreneurship. It speaks to their, from a politics perspective, they still want to be seen as the party of growth. So they, if it's other investments and gains made on other assets, that wouldn't necessarily be, Labour's traditional darlings. But if they want to be seen as the party of growth and they want to encourage entrepreneurs, they want to keep that business asset disposal relief there, so that people are still encouraged to start businesses, to grow them enough that they can sell them and then eventually make money.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing about entrepreneurs relief is it used to be 10 million, and it was actually the Conservative government that cut it to 1 million. So, but capital gains tax, used to. I'm fairly sure it used to be 28%. So this is, it's been historically low. So probably we're just seeing a more normalization. And even in the 80s, it was taxed at the same rate as income. And many countries in the world tax it at the same rate as income. So I think, I know there's going to be gnashing of teeth, but I think it could have been a whole lot worse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I saw, I think was really welcomed, and I think is very good for the startup world as well, is the extension of EIS and VCT schemes, for 10 years. I think there's a real fear that these things are gone, and again, it was, I think, it's felt like a budget of headlines. So, literally pushing out every piece of potential bad news and seeing which gets the most anger and who they've upset as well. But that's, I think there was a general theme of locking in things for a longer time, which I guess if you've got a 5-year majority, you can do.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was saying about, if there's that clarity there for business owners, it makes it so much easier. Really, the chopping and changing, and we remember Liz Truss's previous budget, and business really needs the stability and the clear pathway, and I think you're exactly right in that if they have that longer term stability, that is really invaluable. So the EISs and the VCTs are really useful tools, and can be hugely beneficial. So the extension is great. The other one is corporation tax. I mean,
I was going to come on to corporation tax. Again, really, one of the lowest in the, I think the lowest in the G7.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one I think they'd said in the manifesto they weren't going to change it, but now they've said 5 years.
Yeah. Again, from a planning perspective, I mean, tax mitigation, I suppose, is all about planning, setting things up in the right way, making sure that you have an eye on the future and it aligns with the plans. And if you have that 5-year horizon, it makes it so much easier to do. So it's really welcomed in that. I think you were spot on in their tactic. They announced as much bad news as they possibly could, tested the water to see what, how it was being judged, and then kind of rolled it back. So really, I mean, it's a sensible enough decision when you're an incoming government to make it seem as bad as possible, and then kind of whenever it's actually delivered, it doesn't seem quite as bad as what it's being touted as. Like, don't get me wrong, the employer's NI is horrendous, but if they had have done everything all together, I mean, geez, it would have been completely. It could have been a whole lot worse. I mean, I know how many people, when we were talking about the capital gains tax aspects, were saying, well, my solution is I'm just going to move to Dubai and that's it. I just can't put up with this country anymore. So maybe it's still an attractive place to do business, and it's still good for the entrepreneurs. So, it's good from that point of view.
Yeah, I think where they've been certain, it's been good because, as you say, you can plan for that, and the employer's NI, it'll be in, it won't be reversed, it'll be, and people will, as I say, suck it up. They'll pass it on to their customers. I think as well the one worrying thing I think is probably the inflationary pressures that I think this budget will introduce. You've got the national minimum wage going up, which will feed very quickly into extra spending. Typically, people on low income spend the vast majority of their income, and it goes in, it goes out. I hope I don't get cancelled for that stereotypical comment, but I'm sure we can back that up with some evidence somewhere. I think the other thing is there's the other thing for me was the sheer scale of public, not only infrastructure investment, but 20 billion to add to the NHS budget. And that was just a wow. That is, and I feel the NHS is a bit of a leaky bucket, and pouring more money in won't necessarily fix it. But it will go into the economy, to people like us, to recruiters, fund, in the healthcare sector and the construction sector. So it'll probably be good news at some point.
It is one thing I thought was absent. We had Keir Starmer saying in no uncertain terms a couple of weeks ago that there isn't going to be any more money for the NHS, no more money without reform. But we were very light on any detail on that today. Actually, the same with the money that was being promised to the devolved governments. That there wasn't a lot of detail, but I suppose that's something that will be published later. But I think there's the political dimension to this as well, that we have to, we can't set the budget apart from that. They've recently fought an election, really being attacked by the Conservative government that they were going to raise taxes. That was just the attack line the whole time along, that the working people were going to be hit, and they're the party of raising tax, so they knew that they had to do something. And they couldn't touch income tax, and they couldn't touch employees' national insurance. And for everything that they've changed, I think it's interesting what hasn't changed as well. The main rate of corporation tax, which was introduced by a Conservative government not that long ago, they've now said that, we're happy. We're just going to keep that until the end of this Parliament. We're going to keep full expensing. We're going to keep the £1 million.
Well, that's the other thing, the annual investment allowance staying, and because that was brought in when it came from 19% to 25%, basically to stop, because otherwise people would have stopped investing and then just invested, again, because they were certain that they were going to hit by higher taxes. That's their mitigation in 2 to 3 years' time. So it's been really good to see that kept as well, and that could have fallen away. But that's a very pro-business. Again, a very pro, especially small business, an investment, piece. So there was a lot in there. Take the politics aside. There actually was a lot in there for investment, entrepreneurialism as well. A lot more than people feared.
Certainly, a lot more than people feared, and was touted. It is definitely encouraging for the future that we can continue to avail of the growth levers that are there particularly for small business. They really did seem to target the bigger guys, and that's I suppose we'll have to see over time how that plays out. But it is very much welcome that the annual investment allowance remains and the full expensing, because it's so beneficial to investment.
I suppose you could also make a case for the bigger guys being hit, because they don't get hit for the same, they're better planned. They have, the corporation taxes. So, if you're Facebooks and Microsofts and the coffee chain, Starbucks, if you're at, it's maybe a way to get the taxes out of those guys who don't pay it on their profits often, because they can, again, shop around. You can't, in those environments, generally you can't move your people around. So, but I
think, Andy, particularly those ones like Starbucks, where you have maybe not a higher paid employees, you're getting closer to minimum wage employees, but you have a lot of them, in that case, definitely. That's a massive pool of money, unavoidable tax, unavoidable from the employer side. That's going to be going into the government's coffers.
So when the cost of coffee goes up to working people, we know why.
Well, I think just in a slightly funny sense, the largest roar of the budget seemed to be when they announced the duty change to beer. So at least it was a positive.
Yeah, that's very positive for the recruitment world. The other thing, so there's a few other ones that do affect recruitment owners lightly as well. Those with second properties or looking to buy second properties.
Yep, that will be the increase to stamp duty land tax. So the higher rate for additional dwellings has now increased by another 2%. So we're looking at 5%. Is that additional?
Wasn't that already the rate for buying through a limited company anyway? But they've just now extended that to private.
Yeah, that's right. There was a surcharge for properties being purchased by limited companies.
Yeah.
And that has come in immediately. So I don't know if it's from midnight or if it's from the moment you said it, but it's in place now.
I think it's normally from 6 o'clock, or from that. I think it literally comes in at that. It used to be like that on the fuel duty anyway.
I was going to say, because the forecourts normally get changed at 6 p.m.
But Friday's exchange, and you're not going to get your completions done. So it'll be, there might be the odd one rushed through. You never know. But definitely beer going down by a whole penny. That will literally mean it will cost $7.99 in a London pub now. That's great. It's great news for your average drinker. Fantastic. That'll make a real difference. So some of the stuff that we didn't see. And the last one, actually, I thought the biggest roar was the aircraft passenger duty going up. So for those recruitment owners with private jets, that's going to impact them as well, isn't it?
That's right.
So yeah, but your average Joe only pays a couple of quid extra apparently. So that'll mean those Ryanair flights going up to a whole 10 quid or something now. So yeah, that's bad news for the traveller. The things that there were some other things that loosely affect recruitment. So the deal flow in recruitment has been relatively slow this year because of the depressed market. I don't think people were getting the valuations that they think they can get when the market comes back. So I think there's a lot of dry PE powder around, and typically it's certainly for the larger firms. It's we saw a lot of PE deals certainly 18 months, 2 years ago. Changes to carried interest. I mean, this is, I never knew such a thing existed before I started reading that they're going to be changing it. So I know it's a super complex area, but, it's effectively the way VC companies pay themselves. And it's a more efficient way than doing it than income or dividends.
It's definitely, it is a hugely complicated area, but the impact, I suppose, in real terms is if there's an increase to the taxation that those guys have to pay on the deals, then unfortunately that means that it kind of is impacted on the price that they're willing to pay. So that's really that's probably the direct implication is going to be in relation to the valuation that they put on the businesses. So unfortunately that is one that probably does affect the PE world. But at the same time, I would say that there was a lot of PE sitting to wait and see what had actually happened in this budget, what would actually transpire. And I think the other certainties now will maybe outweigh some of the damage that's done by the changes to carried interest. So hopefully with that certainty, you start to see the deals reappear and people kind of putting some of that dry powder to work now.
Definitely. It was also the things that didn't get changed. So the big thing that there was obviously a change to inheritance tax, but there were little sort of things around the side, and there was sort of a big whammy predicted there, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it was some of the worst that could have been done to that kind of stayed away. They did some changes to the business asset relief and the agricultural property relief, but by and large, it all kind of stayed the same. I mean, there was talk of reducing the null rate bands and kind of making a few changes there, but largely kind of held the same and frozen. So the one change is in relation to inherited pensions. Unfortunately, that's they're now in the loop, and it was so anybody passing pensions to their kids, unfortunately, it'll be the kids now have to pay some income tax and that. So that was really the only change. But again, maybe not as bad as it could have been. Not still not great, but not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah, I think that's if you die before you're 75, and it used to be tax-free, and now it will be treated as the scheme as if you're over 75, which is you have to pay. So basically, my advice is spend it all, so your kids don't have to pay tax.
Absolutely. That's the only answer.
Don't leave anything in the tank, guys. But I think the other thing I was pleased with is, apart from that, there was no change to pensions. There was no change to salary sacrifice, which is, again, there was no change to the reliefs on contributions. There was no change to the lifetime allowance, bringing that back in. There was no change to the tax-free lump sum. I wonder if that's for another day, but it felt like, I mean, all of those things have been trailed. So
it is an interesting point, though, because you had said, this is, if there was one budget where they wanted to eat the frog and get all the really bad news out, that would be bringing back the lifetime limit, for instance, would be hugely unpopular. I think. I think it would just be a difficult decision to make and a hard one to sell. Now would have been the time to bring it back in, so maybe it's not something for another day, but
I mean, they also had suggestions around the carry forward allowances. So if you basically haven't funded a pension for up to a 3-year period, that you can stuff 180,000 into a pension in one go and pay no tax on it. Had they taken that away again, that's a huge benefit to so many business owners. So it was nice to see that they left it untouched and that's still there. And again, from tax planning perspective, that's excellent. I mean, it's so useful and
it's
so
such a strong lever for CT planning, definitely.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I think pensions is one of those things that should be stable, because these planning for retirement, it's a 30-year plan. And it can't be kicked to a 40-year plan. It can't be kicked around like a political football. So I did welcome that, and pensions remain a very tax efficient way of dealing with things. But it's also the opportunity cost of locking up your money for a period of time where you can't touch it. But I think the good thing about that is you don't want to discourage people saving into their pensions. The government pension for the public sector pension is the biggest Ponzi scheme in the world, completely unfunded. Same with the state pension. There is no pot of money there. It's a Ponzi scheme. The rewards are paid out by the newcomers to the scheme. And I think it's going to come to a point where it could bankrupt. The public sector pension could potentially bankrupt. I think the other thing with pensions as well was that had you have made changes, I think it would have crippled a lot of NHS doctors who would be paying 80-90% effective rate tax, and I think they're already Orwellian in terms of some pigs are more equal than some animals are more equal than others. If you're in the public sector, you seem to be able, the pension's significantly better. There's more things, but I don't think they could have gone so far as saying if you're a public sector worker, your pension rules are different. So I think that's probably why I like that expression now. They didn't eat the frog on this one, but they've got a year to get the narrative right to do it again, and all those greedy business owners sticking money into their pension to avoid tax.
Well, I think last year, whenever they did away with the lifetime limit, it was because they were saying it had such a discouraging and disincentivizing effect for senior consultants, and there's so much experience being lost in the NHS just because they think that's it, I'm out, so they wanted to get rid of the stick, bring the carrot back in, and now it would be very difficult then to basically just turn that back around. And people, they would have changed their plans. I think enough time has passed that these NHS consultants would have changed their longer term plans.
Yeah.
And it just comes back to uncertainty. Certainty and uncertainty. I think they would much prefer just that they can make long term plans that they can rely on.
Yeah, I think the one thing they could have done was there was a lot set out that this will be 5 years, this will be 5 years, this will be 5 years, this will be so it was one of the things that actually was not talked about. It was noticeable by its absence. I had to sort of go back through and just check that it hadn't been mentioned. I'd missed it. So definitely watch this space. One for the recruitment industry, which was super interesting and caught my eye. Recruitment agencies from 2026 will be responsible for the operation of PAYE through the umbrella companies. Now, this is massive. It effectively could be a direct hit on uncompliant providers. I will caveat though. So I think the rationale and the understanding behind it is if agencies will be really careful around their supply chain. Two caveats to that. One, the employment allowance going up will be absolute fertile ground for mini umbrella companies, and it'll be another decent year of those guys getting away with it. I'd imagine popping up, closing down. And so I think HMRC are going to be pretty busy around that as well. But then when employment agencies become responsible, I think it'll be interesting because the scheme provider, they'll be responsible if their supply chain isn't solid, then they'll be responsible because for people who don't understand what currently happens. Contractor, and a lot of this is in healthcare, contractor will go and say, I want to use this firm. They give me an 85% retention. Effectively, it's either a loan scheme or just a deferment or something like that. Fake pay slips. Normally these things are all outbased in the Isle of Man, yada, yada. So we see these things happening quite a bit. But if the employment agency then carries the risk, they're going to be very careful about who they engage with.
Yeah, I think it's not. I'm not going to say I'm an absolute expert on the area, but if you're trying to clean up a sector and try and stop bad practice, it maybe is another tool to give HMRC to actually pursue them. So, from that point of view, it maybe is a benefit overall. I don't know if that's your take on it as well.
Wow. Well, I think it's going to be interesting, and wait and see. The devil will be in the details. So, but I think what I would say is that these scheme providers potentially then just change their. I think the other caveat is these scheme providers potentially change their place in the supply chain. So they'll just go to them, potentially the end client, and still do what they do. So there is a bit of an existential risk. The then logical knock-on is those people who are getting an 85% retention will then suddenly end up with a 45-50% retention, maybe. I've not done the math in a while, but so that's going to again either affect the workforce or put up the cost. And generally, this is in the healthcare. A lot of this is in the healthcare sector. So I think you're going to see again a lot of rate pressure come through as well as a result of this. But I think it's generally the right thing to do. And HMRC have actually had, I wouldn't necessarily call it success, but it's been effective where they've made agencies effectively police for them. So you see that with IR35 off payroll, then the public sector, then private sector, the changing the off payroll rules. But also as well, I think there's a real opportunity for agencies now to be pushing genuine freelancers as well, and getting contractors outside of those inside IR35 engagements. We have an ability, I believe, on LinkedIn to ask questions. I'm hoping it'll pop up on my screen here. So if you do want to ask a question and you're in the audience, please just tap away or in the comments. And if I can't see them on the screen, I'm sure one of the team will send it to me as well. So, but if you do have a question, do send it through. What would you like to have? What was missing for you? We've talked about. And I think probably everything has been discussed, and I've never known anyone as interested in, so many people interested in the budget as this time. But what was the thing that was missing for you or surprised you?
Niall, it's probably better for that one than I would be.
I was perhaps a bit surprised that the VAT on private school fees went ahead with no changes. I think it was a lot of people were quite ambivalent towards it. It maybe seemed like an easy Labour win, politically speaking. It appealed to their base and so on, but there was a lot, even from the press that would be traditionally sympathetic to Labour. Even the Guardian were publishing articles saying that this is going to potentially put massive strain on the state school system. If you've got a lot of breakage and people leaving the middle class families taking their kids out of private school. So has that been modelled? They said that it had. And then there was just other articles saying, well, this actually could be a benefit to the private schools. A lot of these private schools, the bigger ones at least, that can afford the expensive accountants, have been getting their ducks in a row preparing for this, and they might come out as with a lot of input VAT to claim back, and they could come out ahead with this being implemented. So it was something that, well, in recent weeks, it hadn't really been spoken about as much because the more detailed stuff around the other tax heads had been released. But I thought that there might be some kind of change to that, or maybe rolling it back and putting it off to another day.
Yeah, I thought they were quite disingenuous actually in saying, it's saving 8 billion, but that's over the 5-year period. And I think as well, it's the classic, coming out of Europe will be worth 350 million, well, on the one side, but you've forgotten about the rebate you get. So there's a whole host of things there that, I agree. I think it's quite politically motivated. And I think the one to look for on that is the unintended consequences, that, potentially you'll see that strain on the state system. As you say, schools will be able to claim back the input now, as well. So it's not just as simple as this will go on. But as well with parents as well, do you think it's like all of the entrepreneurs who said they were going to leave the country if there were any changes? If I'm going to pull my kid out of school if there's a change of VAT. I'm sure there will be some that have to, but is it just one of those things that maybe just suck it up a bit?
You do get some commentary though saying that yes, you have that sort of the caricature idea of a private school attendee. It's a very rich family and so on, but that there's a lot of middle class working families that put their children in fee paying schools, but they're not necessarily the hyper expensive fee paying schools, but they're just a better quality of education, and you're hitting those families the hardest. It's the squeezed middle again, I guess, that there's going to be a certain element of them that are genuinely hit by it and they can no longer afford it. And that's the sort of breakage rate that you'll see. Those will be the ones going back into the state school system. But I suppose time will tell as to how big or how small that effect actually is.
So tomorrow morning, or I guess tonight, you're getting notes out to your customers, to your what should recruitment owners be doing as a result of this tomorrow morning? I guess what are the short, medium, and long-term things they should be doing to it, to do that?
It's still probably we're still in the process of digesting it, but I suppose the one that's probably going to affect a lot of clients that we have is the change to the threshold. So I suppose advice to single shareholder owner directors with kind of low numbers of employees would be the salary structure that currently typically exists in those size of business, where you have a tax-free salary element and then the rest in dividends, would maybe have to be restructured now because your NI threshold is so much lower. So that's probably the one that is going to go straight to clients and say, look, we have to start planning for this. So that's April. It's April 25, so there's time, but that's really the one that is going to have to be done for the vast majority, I would think. One thing that I kind of was encouraged by was the EV retention. I thought they would have done something to EVs or the electric charging or something around those, because they are so attractive, and I actually left it alone and kind of extended it again. So, very tax efficient if you own and run kind of a small medium business. So it was encouraging to see that they didn't touch that either.
And is it better to buy an EV? We classically get this comment on the group. Is it better to buy an EV or is it better to lease an EV?
It's probably just more around the timing. If you buy one, or if it's something that's in the nature of a purchase, like a hire purchase, you'll get the accelerated tax relief. So you would get a full capital allowance for the cost of the vehicle. Or the alternative is, of course, you lease and you just your monthly payments, they're deductible for tax. So your relief is spread across 36 months, 48 months, whatever the lease term is, but you're getting the same amount of corporation tax relief, basically. A couple of years ago, that would have been different advice when the super deduction was a thing. It's no longer a thing, so you're just looking at 100% of the cost anyway. You'll have a benefit in kind under either of those, whether you buy it or you lease it. Now those rates are increasing over the next couple of years, but it's still very attractive. At the minute it's 2% of the list price of the vehicle. It's going up to 5% over the next couple of years. It's tapering up, but it's still, you compare that with
better,
Yeah, you compare that with a petrol or diesel vehicle. It's crazy how tax efficient it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, normally that's where the conversation starts in our groups. It's around the tax efficiency, and then it's then everyone's like bowling in with like, do I want a Tesla? Do I want a Taycan? Do I want to? Yeah, and then it goes into which is the best people carrier. So yeah, then it goes. It does go quite there. Sorry, Michael, I cut you off there.
No, it was actually just on a thing. I noticed that Tesla's Model 3 now is $250 a month, depending on how much you put down. So it's, it was at one stage they were ridiculously expensive. I mean, that's not really the case. And if your business is paying for it, it's even better.
Like you could have a 50K Tesla Model 3. I think that's maybe what they still cost. If you're a higher rate taxpayer, that's only costing you £400 a year, in additional income tax. Obviously, the company has to be able to bear it, from a cash flow perspective. But that's the end cost to you. It's it's crazy.
Yeah.
So just a reminder, anybody on the LinkedIn Live that wants to ask a question, just pop it in the comments. Be the first to comment and ask us questions. So I think from my perspective, there was a lot of panic, and with the certainty now, I think everyone will just now go back to focusing on finishing up strong in 2024 and starting again in 2025.
Yeah, I definitely there was a lot of panic, and certain things that, I mean, you asked about what wasn't there, but if they had have conducted certain things, if they had have taken away business asset disposal relief, that would have been huge for business owners, and they left it alone. So really, I think you're right. It provides that certainty for people now, where they can kick on and finish out strong in 24, and then into 25 they have a clear path forward. So at least it's out of the way now. It's not maybe as bad a frog as Niall had maybe thought of, but so we can all kind of go back to not running about with our hair on fire, worrying about what's coming, and kind of concentrate on the business. So it's encouraging from that way.
I think as well, just from you spoke about investors, and if you're trying to forecast, you're trying to put together a valuation of a business, for instance, if you've now got the certainty of what corporation tax rates are going to be, and that's what they're going to be for the next 5 years, even just certainty around CT, that's going to improve. It's going to reduce the uncertainty that's inherent in your valuations. It's going to probably, it'll encourage investors. It'll increase their buy-in, now that there is across not the market, but the different tax heads, that there are certainties built in now. I suppose the only thing that I noticed wasn't spoken about is the fiscal drag. It's they're not spoken about because basically it's what some people will call a stealth tax. You've got so many more people now coming on to, the national minimum wage is going to be something around 23,000, I think, for a full-time employee.
Yeah.
There's so much more earnings that are above the tax-free personal allowance. So many more people are going to be paying tax. The thresholds haven't changed. They're staying the same. There's no change to the VAT threshold. So yes, there's certainty with all these thresholds staying the same, but it's going to increase fiscal drag, and they know that. I think they've obviously done their modeling that they know with the fiscal drag. They can say it that, look, things aren't changing. We'll be certain around these, and your thresholds are staying the same. But they know, with inflationary pressures and the increase to earnings and so on, there's going to be so much more of a tax take.
I think another thing missing for me was I would like to have seen something left field. Everything was tinkering pretty much, with existing, few like changes of reliefs, et cetera. But I'd have loved to have seen something like, if you've been out of work for a year, then there's a tax relief for you. And again, that's but if you've been on incapacity benefit, then there's there's not that cliff edge taper, where if you go back to work, you've got to earn a certain amount before, it's not worth you doing. I think, getting people even back into part-time, it's a once in a lifetime budget where you could do, that sort of, like the super deduction, or the super allowance. You could have done something revolutionary and chose not to. And actually, people being economically inactive is a bigger issue we face.
Yeah, I think that's true, because you're right. They had an opportunity to do that, but there wasn't anything hugely revolutionary or anything where you kind of go, that is really going to provide an impetus for growth or a massive change for business. It just was absent. Was really tinkering around the edges and kind of playing it safe to a certain extent. But like the likes of the super deduction or some of the R&D things to encourage investment and productivity gains and innovation, they just weren't there. Sorry, Niall, I got across you there.
No, just the one thing I guess that they did mention was, this investment in the NHS and the investment in infrastructure, like you said earlier, Andy. Hopefully that will have a bit of a stimulus effect on the economy, and it'll increase the velocity of money, because normally whenever we see those sorts of commitments to spending public money on infrastructure projects and so on, it does have a stimulating effect. But yeah, no, I do take your point.
Okay, we've got our first question. Is there any help for a business to grow? From what I've seen, it's all about my employees costing me more, from Chris Weatherall. So did you see anything in there to cheer Chris up?
Niall, do you want to take that?
So,
I suppose
Chris has a business. He's based in Milton Keynes. He employs 5 or 6 people and does contracting globally with supplying Oracle professionals globally. So is there anything you saw there that was going to help Chris grow?
No, I mean, I suppose one takeaway that Chris potentially might have is, he'll save a bit on employment allowance. It's increased. I don't know the profile of his employees. He could be over the threshold and not receive it at all anyway. But if he's within that threshold, that's a small bit of sweetness to take away from it.
Yeah,
okay.
I think at that kind of size, he might be looking at a reduction in his employer's NI overall because of his employment allowance if he has five staff. So again, targeted towards not targeted towards hitting the bigger, larger companies. So for Chris, actually, he might be on a positive from the employer's NI perspective.
So fantastic. So he should, but then does it taper or does it cliff edge? So if he goes and hires 2 more people, do you lose the?
There's a cliff edge around that. If you're at the level of employees where you're over the threshold then for employment allowance at all, there's that 100,000 cutoff. I'd be interested to see if they make any kind of adjustment to that.
Yeah.
Are they going to increase that to 150,000, something like that? Because, even just with the increase in minimum wages, the total amount of employers NIC is going to increase, obviously, for the next few years.
Yeah. And I think for Chris, it's probably okay for the foreseeable. I mean, if he goes from 5 to 7, I think he'll retain his employment allowance. So again, might provide him with a bit more. Okay, he has to pay the 1.2% of the increase, and yes, the threshold's lower, but that 10,500 credit should cover all of that and a bit more.
Fantastic. Just a reminder, if you do want to ask a question, just pop it in the comments and we can go from there. So last 5 minutes, I guess from my perspective, you have a recruitment practice. overall, if you were to mark this out of 10 for recruitment owners as a budget, and mate, you can from somewhere from 0 to actually you can go from -10 to +10. So how would you rate it on that scale?
Ooh, that's a difficult question. Listen, in comparison to what it could have been, it's probably maybe a 3-4, something around that, out of between -10 and +10. It probably could have been a lot worse, but for the vast majority, it's probably there's probably enough at the small level that it's okay. The bigger guys, yeah, okay, but as you say, they can maybe plan a bit more financially for it. They can maybe shoulder a bit more of the burden. So I don't think it's been maybe as bad as it could have been, which is of benefit. But again, I'd come back to the certainty point, and that is there's just been so much panic prior to that. At least now that people can plan and move forward, and from our side, I suppose tax always changes, and these things always kind of come about, and it's a natural thing. But provided you're kind of live to it and looking at the figures, there's always kind of ways to manage around it, and actually make the best out of it. So I think it would maybe just encourage businesses to maybe not be so pessimistic about it, but just maybe kind of embrace it for what it is, and kind of move forward. Like you say, finish out 24 strong into 25. As long as you kind of plan and make the necessary changes, largely it'll be fine.
So to round that up, if people do want to get that advice and a proactive business that's going to help them with the tax, then and planning and giving that stability, and obviously, I guess making the most of the opportunities that I guess you have now with the sort of planning going forward, how can people get in touch with you and hear about this magic?
So I mean, any of the websites, the social media channels we have, we can. They can book a free consultation there, and we can talk them through it. I suppose the advantage that we maybe have over other accountancy practices is because we have a tech stack kind of built behind it, and integrated with the recruitment firm's tech stack. We can see the financial information in near enough real time. So from the planning perspective, that's really where you can add the value. So you can kind of come to a business owner before the year end and say, look, your corporation tax bill's looking like this. You might want to consider a pension. You might want to consider an EV. You might, whatever fits the business. So as long as there's that proactive conversation piece, that's really where it is. But it comes back to the tech stack. If there's not an integration, you have to be on it before the year end, and that's really where we can add the value to people, and to firms. So we can estimate it in advance and kind of mitigate it as we go.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate this is like your Christmas and probably Easter all rolled into one this time of year. Yeah. And thanks so much for coming on, probably at a really busy time, and sharing with our members and the wider LinkedIn community, your thoughts on it. It's really appreciated. And it'll be interesting to see. Perhaps we'll do a podcast in a few months and just see how it's all did it pan out? What were the unintended consequences? So, Niall, Michael, thanks so much. And
thanks, Andy.
Look forward to catching up soon.
Appreciate it, Andy. Thanks very much.
Thanks a million.